The moss-covered ruins of an old plantation harboring the positively ancient spirits of those who once died within, a famous military museum shrouded in ghost stories tied to its blood-soaked artifacts, and an iconic dungeon where phantom pirates and much darker things lurk await on this journey through some more of South Carolina's most haunted places. Let's dive right in. Hey guys, and thanks for joining me on another journey through some more of South Carolina's most haunted places. Recognized for its historic landmarks tied to the forming of our country, for its jaw-dropping nature expanses, southern charm, and unique culture, the Palmetto State also boasts a terrifying number of old hill folk stories, ghost tales, and classic legends sure to send shivers down your spine. Are you sure you're ready for this one? Our first haunt takes us up Black Creek just to the north of Charleston to the massively famous Cypress Gardens. The Cypress Gardens, which are located in Moncks Corner in South Carolina, are a captivating blend of natural beauty and historical significance that are a popular stop for nature enthusiasts, tourists, and history buffs alike, and that's rather eerie-looking grounds play home to a number of classic southern ghost stories and tales of the weird and downright bizarre. Historically, in 1750, a rice plantation called Dean Hall was established on lands now holding the Cypress Gardens, and this plantation would utilize the work of enslaved individuals in order to construct a series of dikes and canals to better manage water levels for rice cultivation, transforming what was initially a rather glum landscape into an efficient agricultural site. On a side note, this same early groundwork would actually be utilized later in the forming of our current swamplands, but more on that in just a sec. Much later, in 1909, one Benjamin Kittredge would purchase the neglected plantation lands, and, recognizing their potential as a natural haven, would set to work restoring the old rice field embankments, would dig new canals and redig out old ones through the swamps, and would introduce a number of plant species. By 1932, Kittredge would open the Cypress Gardens to the public as a serene escape into nature, and subsequently, in 1963, his son, who was also named Benjamin, would donate his father's cherished property to the city of Charleston to ensure its continued preservation, and that his father's legacy live on. Sadly, over the years, the gardens would face significant challenges. In 1989, Hurricane Hugo would cause extensive damages across the expanse, and in 2015, historic flood levels would cost the property millions of dollars, resulting in their prolonged closure, and in the site not reopening until 2019, which it did to a crowd of over 3,000 eager visitors. Today, the Cypress Gardens offer a wide variety of attractions, including 3.5 miles of trails, flat-bottom boat tours, and viewings of the ecosystem's various wildlife, including alligators, turtles, and multiple unique bird species. The gardens also boast their iconic butterfly house, which, along with butterflies, houses various birds, koi, goldfish, and turtles, alongside its swamparium, which showcases rare fish, reptiles, and amphibians. Additionally, the expanse has acted as a filming location for numerous productions, including that of The Notebook, and as the swampland hideout we all remember from The Patriot. In the present, this prestigious site is open daily from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., and if we're being honest, who'd really want to stay there any later? Within the Cypress Gardens lies a tapestry of haunting tales that have intrigued and terrified visitors for years. While the gardens certainly are renowned for their picturesque landscapes and cinematic allure, they also harbor a number of stories that suggest a more supernatural aspect. One of the most frequently reported phenomena involves disembodied voices echoing through the cypress groves, and visitors have recounted hearing whispers and murmurs, especially near the old footbridges, with no discernible source in sight. The man-made ruins within the gardens, designed to evoke a sense of antiquity, have inadvertently become focal points for paranormal activity, and guests who have neared them have described sudden chills, unexplained shadows, and the feeling of being watched or followed by someone or something unseen. Additionally, some even claim to have captured fleeting figures in photographs, only to find no one present upon closer inspection. Adding to the eerie ambiance, Cypress Gardens host an annual Haunted Swamp Experience each October, an event that features haunted boat rides and walking trails, further immersing participants in the spine-tingling legends associated with the area. Now, whether you're a skeptic or a believer, the haunting allure of the Cypress Gardens offers a unique blend of natural beauty and supernatural intrigue. Our second haunt has us traveling right near the South Carolina-Georgia border to the iconic and overgrown Stoney Baynard ruins. The Stoney Baynard ruins, which are located on Hilton Head Island in South Carolina, are the remnants of an old plantation that offer a glimpse into the state's antebellum past and Civil War history. That's bounds welcome countless tourists each and every year, and that are surrounded by a host of local legends and tales of the inexplicable. Historically, through the 1790s, one Captain Jack Stoney, who was a Revolutionary War hero and prosperous privateer, would set to work on the establishment of what was then called the Braddock's Point Plantation on Hilton Head Island. Incidentally, he would utilize the wealth he'd amassed from his day's privateering, and would construct a grand tabby mansion from a mixture of oyster shells, lime, and sand. Notably, this architectural style was not only practical, but symbolic of the region's adaptation to local materials and to the owner's affluence. When complete, the site would boast a main house, an overseer's residence, and slave quarters that were all used in tandem in the forming of a working estate. By 1837, the plantation had changed hands and was owned by the Baynard family, a shift that in itself is shrouded in local lore. Now, some say a Stoney heir lost the property in a poker game, while others attribute this acquisition to a gradual loss in Stoney financials, resulting in lands being sold to cotton planter William Eddings Baynard. Whatever the case, Baynard would reside on site until his death in 1849, and would spend his everyday expanding operations while constructing what is now recognized as the oldest mausoleum on the island for his family. Amidst the Civil War, life as the plantation knew it was shattered. In 1861, Union forces would occupy Hilton Head, and following the Battle of Port Royal the same year, the Baynard estate was seized and repurposed as a headquarters. Following the war, as a slaving plantation, the old house was burned to the ground, and slowly, its ruins would slip into disrepair. While these aged ruins were always recognized as a historic landmark, it wasn't until the mid-20th century that preservation efforts were spurred, and finally, in 1994, the site was added to the National Register of Historic Places. Today, the official site itself encompasses around 6 acres, and features the remnants of all 3 original structures. It's managed by the Sea Pines Community Service Associates, and preservation efforts over this cultural historic landmark are still firmly in place. The whole of the site offers a number of trails that visitors can walk through the surrounding area, and informational signage providing insight into its history. Few places on Hilton Head stir the supernatural imagination quite like the Stoney Baynard plantation ruins, and as some of my more attentive viewers might remember, guys, I actually touched on this one when I covered Hilton Head in the past, but there's just so much on it that I felt it deserved its own listing. Long after the plantation fell to time and fire, something seems to have remained amongst the crumbling walls and moss-draped oaks, and those who visit after dark often leave with more than just photos. The most common apparition on site is that of William Baynard himself. Both locals and tourists have reported sighting a figure in antebellum attire silently pacing the ruins, sometimes pausing as if surveying lands that no longer exist, and witnesses usually tell that he disappears when approached, often leaving behind a sudden chill or the faint scent of tobacco smoke. Perhaps the most chilling legend is that of the area's phantom funeral procession. Several accounts describe a line of spectral figures moving solemnly through the site, a horse-drawn carriage leading mourners dressed in 19th century garb, and most claims place the event late at night and usually accompanied by an unnatural stillness and muffled voices no one can really understand. Visitors also report sudden temperature drops, malfunctioning electronics, and the feeling of being watched, and some claim to hear faint music or crying near the foundation, especially around the remnants of what was once the main house. Though there are no formal ghost tours of the ruins, the site remains a hotspot for amateur paranormal investigators, and for the occasional visitor who comes away with a story they didn't expect to tell. And on to number 3, which lies in the heart of Columbia, and has us touring the South Carolina Military Museum. The South Carolina Military Museum, or SCMM, which is located in Columbia, South Carolina, is a popular educational venue that stands as a testament to the state's significant military heritage. Its bounds have long been tied to rumors of ghostly activity associated to their numerous relics and artifacts, which range from colonial era up into the present. Historically, in 1981, what was first called the National Guard Museum and State Weapons Collection was established in Sumter County in a humble 960 square foot space. In 1998, however, it would adopt its current moniker, and amidst growing crowd numbers and profit, would, in 2007, relocate to Columbia. In 2014, the Foundation's current site would open its doors within what was formerly a National Guard motor pool, and thanks to adamant efforts made under both staff and volunteers, the old expanse would be transformed into an inviting museum space for the public. Of the museum's various galleries, a chronological display of South Carolina's military history is featured and boasts artifacts from colonial times up into the modern era, including firearms, edged weapons, uniforms, artillery pieces, and armored fighting vehicles, alongside an assortment of cannons and field pieces from the region. Additionally, those interested in aviation can explore the museum's Skytrails South Carolina's Airfields Then and Now exhibit, which delves into the state's contributions to air travel from the early 1900s to the present. Another fun feature of the museum is that of its oral history program, which actually allows veterans to share their own personal experiences, offering a glimpse into the true bravery and horrors experienced on real battlefields. In more recent years, the museum has welcomed a host of community events and educational programs. And as recently as 2024, it would honor 99-year-old World War II veteran Bruce Cook, who served as a ball turret gunner on a B-17, and who completed no less than 35 missions during the war. And in April of 2025, it hosted the War Songs Festival, which celebrated the role of music in military morale and communication. Soon to be, in June of this year, the site will offer what's called Army Field Day, which will commemorate the U.S. Army's 250th birthday with a jumble of related hands-on activities for families. In the present, the SCMM remains open to the public from Monday through Saturday, from 1000 sharp to 1600, with free admission for visitors to explore its extensive collections, programs, and events. It's an immersive experience that's, quite frankly, pretty hard to beat, honoring the service and sacrifices made by South Carolinians for centuries past. And though it stands as a proud monument to South Carolina's rich military heritage, the South Carolina Military Museum has quietly developed a reputation for being home to more than just artifacts. And according to staff and visitors, the site also hosts an array of inexplicable activity that grows more persistent with each passing year. Some of the property's earliest reports were subtle in nature. Footsteps heard in empty exhibit halls, the faint rustle of fabric when no one was even near the uniform displays, or the sudden clatter of a dropped rifle when the room was empty and locked. Several staff members have sworn they've heard whispered conversations in old dialects, and one even recounted a voice muttering "Ready arms" in a low, gravelly tone near the Civil War exhibit. More unnerving are the reoccurring sightings of a man in World War II fatigues, seen walking silently between glass display cases in the World War II wing. A visitor once attempted to photograph what she thought was a reenactor only to find the hallway entirely empty, and her camera later showed a blurred figure partially reflected in the glass, his face indistinguishable, standing right beside a mannequin. That section of the museum is now known unofficially as Company D, a nickname used amongst staff when referring to unexplained goings-on. The most prolific and widely discussed incident took place during a veterans event in 2016, when the main exhibit lights reportedly flickered wildly during a moment of silence, and audio recorders accidentally left on captured what some believe is a whispered, "Still here," directly before the lights returned to normal. While the museum attributed the event to faulty wiring, electricians later reported no sign of electrical problems. Another unsettling episode happened to a night security officer in 2019. While making his rounds, he claims to have seen a shadow cross to the far end of the Medal of Honor exhibit, and when he approached, the display's lights cut off. They came back on moments later to reveal several standing placards had been knocked flat, as if stricken by a force moving through the room. Notably, no intruder was ever found. Today, the museum continues to operate normally, and none of these occurrences have ever been deemed as dangerous, only unexplained. Still, some employees have developed habits. They leave certain lights on longer than needed, avoid locking certain cabinets at night, and almost never refer to the World War II figure after dusk. They say the museum is safe, just not always empty. Number 4 lands us smack dab in Charleston Harbor and has us exploring the valiant USS Yorktown. The USS Yorktown, or CV-10, which is moored in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, is an Essex-class aircraft carrier constructed through World War II under the U.S. Navy that's since been transformed into a popular museum and educational venue, and its bounds are rumored to harbor literally countless restless spirits. Historically, construction of what was originally called the Bonhomme Richard was started when her keel was laid down on December 1st of 1941 in Newport News, Virginia, at the Newport News Shipbuilding and Dry Dock Company. And for those history buffs out there, yes, that was a mere 6 days before the attack on Pearl Harbor. Initially, there was another vessel, a Yorktown-class aircraft carrier CV-5 that was also called the USS Yorktown, and that served in a number of battles. However, sadly, this earlier Yorktown fought valiantly and was sank during the Battle of Midway. Incidentally, following her sinking in 1942, the Bonhomme Richard was renamed as the USS Yorktown in her fallen sister's honor, and just like her lost comrade, when she was launched in 1943, she would do so under a prestigious sponsorship by none other than Eleanor Roosevelt. While CV-10 was launched on April 15th of 1943, it would remain in the Naval Station Norfolk area until the 21st of May, when it would embark for shakedown training near Trinidad, and after a brief return for training and service in Norfolk, she would sail south and through July would transit the Panama Canal, after which she would engage in training in Hawaii before charging into live combat. Through the latter months of 1943 and into January of 1944, CV-10 would participate in battles on both Marshall and Gilbert Islands. Over the following 4 months, the Yorktown would participate in raids all across the Pacific, including in the Marianas, New Guinea, Majuro, and on the Japanese anchorage of Truk Atoll. She would go on to fight in Saipan, New Hebrides, and on the Japanese Palau Islands. Later, through November, she would carry out airstrikes in the Philippines, and in 1945 would support a series of raids on Japan itself, which she would continue to do until the end of the war. Following the war, the USS Yorktown would travel to the San Francisco Bay Area, after which, for a time, she would be utilized to transport US servicemen from places such as Guam back to American soil. Finally, towards the end of 1946, CV-10 would make her way up to Bremerton, Washington, where she was placed on reserve for some well-deserved R&R. While the Yorktown was reactivated for a time and would participate in more minute parts of the Korean War, her glory days were over, and in 1955, she was once again placed on reserve, initially in San Francisco and Pearl Harbor. Through the remainder of the 1950s, the Yorktown would reactivate and participate in several tours of duty off China and through Vietnam, and from 1964 to 1965, she would actively participate in the Vietnam War. Though she was aged at this point, her involvement in more modern combat proved a dominant feature of her activities, and in 1967, she would welcome a complete overhaul to accommodate more current weaponry and systems, before resuming a tour of duty across the Pacific. Finally, in 1968, she would return to Long Beach, California, where she would welcome a slew of repairs. She would go on to serve as a setting for various movies and high-profile shoots, and would even act as a recovery ship for the Apollo 8 space mission. In 1973, the Yorktown's name was officially stricken from the Navy list, after which she would travel the East Coast for a time before in 1975 being moved to Mount Pleasant. In the present, the USS Yorktown acts as part of the Patriots Point Naval and Maritime Museum, and she welcomes countless guests to this day, offering educational plaques, tours, and a wide assortment of events. But the USS Yorktown is not only a military museum, it's also recognized as one of the most famous haunted sites in the region, and both visitors and staff alike have long reported strange occurrences that defy explanation, lending the vessel a reputation for its paranormal activity. Most commonly, guests claim to hear disembodied voices echoing through corridors, often when no one else is around. Unexplained footsteps, slamming hatches, and cold spots are frequently experienced, particularly in the lower decks and engine rooms, and apparitions of sailors in World War II-era uniforms have been spotted roaming the ship, only to vanish when approached. One of the most famous incidents aboard CV-10 involved a group of Boy Scouts during an overnight stay in 1987. As it's told, several scouts reported seeing ghostly red lights rise from the harbor and witnessed full-bodied apparitions of sailors who appeared solid before fading into nothingness. Paranormal investigators, including the team from Ghost Hunters, have explored the ship and captured chilling audio of voices, movement in supposedly empty rooms, and even a figure standing up and walking through a compartment despite the area being locked down. Many speculate that all of this activity may be tied to the 141 crew members who died aboard the Yorktown, a number coincidentally matching the death toll of its predecessor, CV-5. Whether these spirits are echoes of sacrifice or something else entirely, the Yorktown remains a popular hotspot for ghost sightings to this day. Saving the best for last, our fifth and final hunt takes us right across the harbor to Charleston proper and has us braving the old Exchange and Provost dungeon. The Exchange and Provost Dungeon, or the Old Custom House, which is located off East Bay and Broad Streets in Charleston, South Carolina, is a historic structure that served a variety of civic functions through its many centuries, and that's recognized not only as one of the oldest buildings in the state, but also as one of its most haunted. Historically, the Exchange was first constructed from 1767 to 1771 by the provincial government of South Carolina, and was utilized for a number of civic functions, such as for a public market, as a customs house, and as a general meeting space, and even, at times, as a jail. Through the American Revolution, in 1774, the space was used to store confiscated tea, and in subsequent years, it would also host meetings for South Carolina's Revolutionary Leadership Council. Following the British capture of Charleston in 1780, for a time, the exchange was actually used as a barracks, with its basement holding a military prison, and shortly afterwards, the British would also use the property as a general prison, which would eventually spread up from the basement to other floors as well. Rather darkly, today, we still aren't sure how many inmates were housed and how many may have died within its walls. However, historians have been able to recover documentation clarifying that the lockup held at least 120 or so. Following the war, in 1788, and through the early formation of our country, the site would be used to host the South Carolina Convention to ratify the U.S. Constitution, and would be utilized by none other than George Washington himself, who was greeted by the public from its balcony through his week-long stay in Charleston. Following these stints in war and politics, the old structure would return to use as an exchange during which, sadly, hundreds if not thousands of enslaved individuals were sold from within. And beginning in the mid-19th century, it would also serve as a post office. On a side note, during this period, citizens would often stop by to collect their mail, and if they got there after 10 a.m., which was the start of the sale period, they would be surrounded by clients and a number of slaves. Additionally, however, through the 19th century, the postmaster would actually defend a shipment of abolitionist pamphlets from an angry mob comprised of Charleston's richer class. And in the South, this was a rare and progressive show of character that quite possibly could have gotten that man killed in that day and age. Shortly after this period, from 1861 to 1865, the Civil War would rage. At the start of the conflict, the exchange would be re-established as a Confederate post office. However, shortly into the war, it would be hit by several shells, resulting in its abandonment until long after the battles were finished. After lying dormant for decades, in 1913, the property would be granted to the Daughters of the American Revolution, who set to work on a series of fundraisers and who worked diligently to restore and preserve the site. Through the chaos of World War I, the old exchange was actually used by General Leonard Wood as an army headquarters, and would also be shared by the U.S. Lighthouse Service. Later, through World War II, the exchange would be put to use once again as a USO facility and cantina for troops, while also serving as a coastal picket station for the 6th Naval District of the United States Coast Guard, after which it would return to standing as a historic site and icon to the neighborhood. More recently, in 1965, the Half Moon Battery, which was a 1698 fortification, was actually discovered underneath the building. In 1969, the exchange was added to the National Register of Historic Places. In 1973, it was designated a National Historic Landmark. And in 1981, the structure's cupola, which was heavily damaged in a hurricane sometime through the early 1800s, was replaced. Finally, following a full restore, the site was opened up as a museum. Today, this old dungeon is still owned by the Daughters of the American Revolution, who offer it to the public along with the option for guided tours of all 3 floors. While at one point these tours were graced with animatronic figures that would tell stories of pirates in the colonial days, now, these animatronics have been replaced in favor of live docents specializing in history. Now, not really all that surprisingly, the exchange in Provost Dungeon has long been shrouded in tales of restless spirits. Through the late 1600s and mid-1700s, Charleston was still a walled city, and pirates or marauders who were caught, such as the notorious Stede Bonnet and his crew, were taken down to the dungeon to await public execution. Within the dungeon, many have reported hearing disembodied screams and moans, chains that swing around on their own, and extreme cold spots. And more disturbingly, several have reported being pushed or hit by unseen hands. Additionally, a range of full-bodied apparitions, including one that matches the likes of Old Steed, have been sighted lurking in the shadows. Informal investigations of the site have yielded high EMF levels, chilling EVPs, and hits on thermal grids, spirit boxes, and Ouija boards, while others have told of smelling phantom wafts of tobacco smoke without source. But it isn't just the dungeon portion of the site that totes paranormal activity, and across the upper exchange portion, visitors have told of doors opening and closing on their own, of lights that flicker without cause, and of instances in which groups are approached by figures clad in Revolutionary-era garb that they believe at first to be actors, only to watch in astonishment as said figures either fade or walk straight through solid walls. While it's unknown what the cause is, some tell of instances in which they feel dizzy, anxious, or inexplicably oppressed when entering the property. These strange bouts have been known to last through their entire visits, and some have even claimed they've felt as if one of the aged building's ghostly inhabitants has followed them home. Thanks for braving this adventure through some more of South Carolina's most haunted places. If you enjoyed hearing my histories and ghost stories, subscribe to my channel, throw this upload a like, and share me with anyone you feel could use a good scare. I'll catch you all next time, and stay spooky.